I never imagined that at 62 years old, I would sit alone, staring at my only daughter's wedding invitation with my name slashed out in bold red ink. For weeks, Amelia had been punishing me for one thing: refusing to sell the family cabin to bankroll her lavish vineyard wedding to her fiancé Daniel. She had no idea that on the morning of her big day, I would receive a phone call that would unravel everything, a truth she'd buried so deeply even she had begun to believe the lie. The walls of the cabin still echoed with memories. Amelia dancing barefoot in the living room to Stevie Nicks on Saturday mornings, flowers smudging our cheeks as her father, Mark, taught her to bake cinnamon rolls from scratch. Out back, you could still see the faint outlines of chalk murals from her teenage years, abstract portraits and dreamscapes she insisted would one day hang in a gallery. Mark always encouraged her artistic soul, telling anyone who'd listen that his daughter saw the world in brushstrokes and light. After Mark passed away when Amelia was 22, I picked up extra shifts at the bookstore and took on late-night editing gigs so she could finish her MFA in fine arts without worrying about tuition. I never complained. She was my heart, and I would have done anything to help her build a future. So when she brought Daniel to meet me, his designer suit pressed so crisply it felt staged, I tried to be open-minded. He was polite, sure, but slick in a way that raised quiet alarms. When Amelia showed me the diamond on her finger, oversized and garish, I forced a smile. "It's beautiful," I said, meaning the engagement, not the ring. A flicker of something disappointment maybe crossed her face. I should have paid more attention. The months that followed were cordial but tense. Then, during brunch one Sunday, she and Daniel blindsided me with a suggestion. "We've looked into some wonderful retirement communities near the coast," she said, sliding a brochure across the table. "Selling the cabin could give you a fresh start and help us start married life on the right foot." My hand trembled as I pushed the brochure back. "This is my home," I said quietly. "Mark and I built our life here. Amelia, you grew up in this house." Her expression turned cold, almost unfamiliar. "You're being selfish," she said. "It's just a building." That was the moment I realized I didn't recognize the person she was becoming. I hadn't planned to attend the wedding after being officially uninvited, but I couldn't help myself. I needed to see her, even if only from the back row. I just wanted to bear witness to the life I'd helped build, hoping there was still a sliver of the girl I'd raised. That morning, as I fastened the vintage pearl necklace my friend Lorraine had lent me for strength, she'd said I heard the phone ring. I nearly let it go to voicemail, but something made me pick up. "Mrs. Carter?" The voice was unfamiliar, shaky. "Yes, this is Nora Carter," I replied. "Who is this?" "My name is Jenna Porter. We've never met." But she paused, breath hitching. "I don't know who else to call. There's something you need to know about your daughter's wedding, about Daniel." I sat down slowly, heart pounding. Outside, Lorraine stood by her car, glancing toward the house, waiting to drive me to a wedding that, suddenly, felt like it might not happen at all. "I'm listening," I said. I sank into the armchair, the fabric pressing against my back as if anchoring me to the moment. My mind raced. "Are you saying he's some kind of scammer?" I whispered. "I'm saying he's calculated," Jenna replied calmly, though her voice trembled with something close to rage. The first time I thought it was a tragic coincidence. His ex-fiancé's parents sold their family beach cottage to help pay for a wedding at a vineyard resort in Napa just 2 weeks before the ceremony. It all fell apart. He called it off, claiming emotional unavailability. But by then, the money was spent and the home was gone. I felt eyes blooming in my chest. And the second time, that's where it got darker. Jenna exhaled. "This time, Daniel's mother. There are texts, messages where he talked about leveraging maternal real estate, meaning your house. He literally called it that." I could barely breathe. "Why are you telling me this now? Why today?" "Because last night, he called me drunk, laughing. He said he'd finally pulled it off, that he'd turned Amelia against you completely. Told me he convinced her you were selfish, manipulative, and stuck in the past." Jenna's voice cracked. "And then he said, and I'm quoting, 'Let her rot in that creaky cabin full of dead men's memories while we flip her equity into a Soho loft.'" The cruelty of the words hit like a physical blow. My mouth went dry. "Do you have proof?" "Yes. Screenshots of messages, voice memos, photos of the previous properties, even a recording of last night's call. I started saving everything after what he did to Meredith's parents. My voice steadied as something inside me crystallized. That's all that matters now. We exchanged numbers and agreed to stay in touch. When I hung up, Lorraine was watching me, her eyebrows knitted in confusion. In short, measured sentences, I explained what I'd learned. "Oh my God," she murmured when I finished. "What are you going to do?" I looked at the antique clock on the wall. Nearly am first. I checked my email. The old desktop whirred and clicked, slower than my pulse but equally unrelenting. At last, the inbox opened. Jenna's email was waiting, attachments and all. I printed every image, transcript, and file I could. As the pages slid out of the tray, I gathered them into a leather folder Mark had once used for lectures. Lorraine eyed me. "Not as a guest, then?" "No," I said. "As a mother, they're going to have security. Then we'll find another way." Lorraine didn't argue. She grabbed her coat and keys. We moved quickly, urgency settling over us like fog. As we drove toward the venue, doubt gnawed at me. Was I about to publicly humiliate my daughter on her wedding day? But I also knew I couldn't let her life be dismantled by someone so cold and conniving. At the estate entrance, Lorraine straightened her back, adopting the brisk authority she'd used for decades as a head nurse. "Excuse me," she said, stopping a flustered server juggling champagne flutes. "We're here with an urgent message for Miss Carter. Groom's suite? Second floor, East Wing. But they're headed to the ceremony site soon, so..." We didn't wait for him to finish. Inside the suite hallway, we found Amelia's cousin Andy. His face registered a flicker of something was a doubt. "Andy," I said, breathlessly, "please, I need to speak to Amelia. It's urgent." Before he could answer, the door opened. Amelia stood there. For a moment, she simply stared. In her ivory silk gown, she looked so much like her father it ached. Her jaw tightened. "Mom?" she said, half in disbelief, half in anger. "What are you doing here?" I didn't waste time. "Daniel has done this before," I said, opening the folder and stepping closer. "He's been engaged 3 times to women whose families had property but little liquid cash. Each time, he manipulated the parents into selling something precious to fund lavish weddings, then disappeared just before the big day." She blinked. "No, that's not." "Photos, contracts, texts, recordings." I handed her the papers. "Read them." She hesitated, then took them. Her eyes moved across the pages, slower and slower as the realization built. Her expression shifted from confusion to disbelief to horror. "He said he was working with a gallery in Brooklyn," she whispered. "He showed me emails. He said the loft was part of a startup art residency." I handed her the falsified lease agreements. "It's all fake, sweetheart. He's been lying to you." Amelia staggered back a step. The pages fluttered in her trembling hands. Then she looked up at me, eyes full of tears, voice full of quiet devastation. "Thank you for coming," I said softly, using the endearment I hadn't dared speak in years. "Sweetheart." A voice cut through the silence. "Amelia, everyone's waiting," called a wedding coordinator from down the hall. "The officiant says we need to start in 5 minutes, or we'll lose our time slot for the garden ceremony." Amelia sat motionless, the folder of evidence open across her lap. Her eyes, glassy with tears and disbelief, flicked between the pages and my face. She looked younger than she had in years, like the little girl who used to sit cross-legged on the cabin floor, painting dreamscapes on scrap paper. "What do I do?" she asked, her voice almost childlike. "There are over 200 people out there, Daniel's family, my friends, donors from the gallery, everyone. You have options," Lorraine said gently but firmly from the corner. "You can postpone, citing a personal emergency, or you can go through with it, knowing what you know." It was more than I dared hope that Amelia was even asking the question. "What now?" Lorraine asked. I glanced at my watch. 10:58. Now, we wait and pray she finds the strength to do what needs to be done. We slipped downstairs through a back corridor, avoiding the main hall where guests milled with champagne flutes and polite laughter. Through a side window, I could see the garden ceremony site, rows of white chairs, lavish floral displays, a vine-covered arbor ready for vows. Musicians were tuning strings. Everything was picture perfect, and none of it real. Daniel's voice broke the stillness from around the corner. "You ungrateful little fool. Do you have any idea what you're throwing away? He sneered. Who do you think would want you without me? You're nothing but a second-rate muralist from nowhere, still living off your dead father's cabin and your mother's pity. Amelia stood still, absorbing the verbal assault with a calmness that surprised even me. When he paused to catch his breath, her response was so quiet I couldn't hear it. But I saw the effect. Daniel recoiled as if slapped. For a moment, they stood in silence, like statues in a tragedy. A tall man in an expensive suit, Mr. Bradford. Daniel's father spotted us from across the hallway. His eyes narrowed with immediate hostility. You, he growled, striding toward us. This is your doing. You just couldn't stand to see your daughter happy, could you? Had to poison her against Daniel because you're jealous of her youth, her talent, her future. I straightened my spine, meeting him eye to eye. Mr. Bradford, I understand you're upset, but perhaps you should speak with your son before making accusations. My son? He gave a bitter laugh. It would be almost comical if it weren't so tragic. Do you have any idea how many women chase him? Do you really think Amelia could do better? I stared at him, pity rising in my chest. I think we both know this isn't about cold feet. Your son needs help, not more excuses. And my daughter deserves the truth. Before he could respond, Amelia's cousin Andy appeared at the end of the corridor, scanning the hallway. When he saw me, he hurried over, ignoring Mr. Bradford entirely. Mrs. Carter, come with me. Now, the library at the Oak Ridge estate was serene, a room of deep mahogany shelves, velvet armchairs, and tall windows that soaked the space in soft morning light. Amelia stood with her back to the window, her silhouette framed by budding spring trees. Her veil was gone. So was Daniel. She'd removed her shoes, tossed aside her bouquet. Her dress was slightly wrinkled, her hair undone, but she looked more like herself than she had in months. I told him it was over, she said quietly. He called me pathetic, said I'd regret this for the rest of my life. I walked to her side. You won't. Not once you see clearly again. I already do. She gave me a broken smile, clearer than I have in years. Outside, we could hear chaos-raised voices, walkie-talkie squawking. The wedding coordinator appeared in the doorway, visibly rattled. Miss Carter, she said hesitantly, I don't mean to intrude, but Daniel has left. In the bridal car. His parents are trying to calm the guests, but the situation is tense. Amelia let out a breath, something between relief and disbelief. I'll need to go back to my place eventually, she murmured. Daniel has a key. Half his things are still there. You'll come home with me, I said simply, without hesitation. For as long as you need. Home, she repeated, almost reverently, as though she weren't sure she still had one. You will always have a home with me, Amelia. Always. The next 15 minutes passed quietly. Amelia scribbled brief remarks on Oak Ridge stationery. Lorraine and I helped her braid her hair, touch up her makeup, smooth her sleeves. A few friends gathered outside the library waiting. When the doors opened, Amelia stood calmly, the papers in her hand. I can't marry Daniel, she began. Certain truths have come to light that make a marriage between us impossible. The staff will still serve the reception meal. Please consider it my thanks for your understanding and support. I'm deeply sorry for the disruption. She stepped back. A stunned silence filled the room. Then a ripple of gentle applause began, spreading slowly through the guests. Back in the car, Amelia stared out the window at the retreating estate. I still feel like it's my fault, she said after a long silence. Lorraine, from the driver's seat, shook her head. It's not. People like Daniel isolate their targets. They create false choices us versus them. I've seen it with my patients too often. You were being manipulated. Amelia turned to me, her voice low. Thank you for coming today, for fighting for me, even when I didn't see what was happening. I reached over and took her hand. You were always worth fighting for. I should have seen through it. Should have questioned why. Daniel was so fixated on the cabin, why. Every conversation about the wedding seemed to circle back to it like a drain. I should have noticed how he subtly chipped away at Amelia's relationships with her friends, her mentors, and with me. After the chaos had died down and the last of the guests dispersed in confusion or awkward sympathy, Amelia went upstairs to change. She needed time to shed the wedding dress, and with it, the residue of a day that should have been joyful but had instead been gutted by betrayal. Lorraine stayed to help me prepare a quiet dinner comfort. Food from Amelia's childhood. Chicken and dumplings, The way Mark used to make them. The way we made them together after his stroke. And later, after he was gone. You're a remarkable woman. Nora Carter, Lorraine said, chopping carrots at the old kitchen island that still bore Amelia's chalk mural from age 9, an underwater scene in faded but defiant pastels. After everything he said to you, after how he treated you, and here you are making her favorite meal. I didn't answer at first. I was watching Amelia come back into herself, not all at once, but in subtle, steady brushstrokes. Maybe Daniel had unintentionally given her something of value. A line she couldn't unsee. A clarity about her own boundaries. Your father would be proud of how you handled today, I said softly when Amelia finally came back down. Standing up in front of all those people and telling the truth. You could have hidden behind a lie. She was quiet for a long time, staring out the window at the dusk settling over the trees. I found Dad's old journal, she said finally, her voice thick with emotion. He wrote about this place like it was a person, like it had a soul. Not just a house but a witness. What had happened today had done more than free Amelia from a toxic relationship. It had begun to restore us to one another, a mother and daughter, reunited on ground more sacred than any wedding aisle. As the first stars flickered into view through the cabin skylight, I made a promise, both to myself and to Mark's memory. This time, Amelia would understand what she'd truly inherited. Not a cabin to be sold or liquidated, but a legacy, a testament to being loved unconditionally. That was a kind of wealth no market could measure. A knock sounded. I opened the door to see Jenna Porter standing there, awkward and certain. Jenna? I said, startled. What are you doing here? I wanted to check on you both, she said. And to warn you, Daniel's not likely to go quietly. Based on past patterns, he tends to retaliate. Amelia came to the doorway just as Jenna's eyes flicked toward her. He's already started, Amelia said. He's using his father's connections to get me blacklisted from 2 upcoming exhibits. I'm being paused, whatever that means, by the gallery board until this unfortunate personal situation resolves itself. Jenna sighed. Check your email and your socials. He'll try to control the narrative. That's what he does. She hesitated, then added, you're not alone. Michael and Daniel are willing to come forward. You're not the only one he's done this to. The idea of allies, of witnesses to the same patterns, seemed to give Amelia back a flicker of her fire. We'll need a strategy, she said, her voice more sure. Thoughtful responses, legal prep, quiet outreach, no public lashing out. As the conversation shifted toward logistics, I stepped into the kitchen to set out the plates. They could plan. I would protect. Later, after everyone had left and the quiet of the night settled around the cabin again, Amelia and I stood at the sink washing dishes in the rhythm we hadn't shared since she was in high school. Outside, the wind moved through the trees. Inside, something steadier moved through her. Even with Daniel's retaliation underway, even knowing how far the Bradfords' influence extended into Amelia's professional circles, I saw in my daughter something I hadn't seen in years. Not fear, not shame, resolve. I felt more hopeful than I had in months. Amelia had walked through fire, through betrayal, humiliation, heartbreak, and somehow emerged not burned, but tempered. There was something essential she'd reclaimed in the crucible of it all. A strength she'd nearly surrendered, a clarity of values, and a quiet return to herself. She was no longer the young woman, so desperate to prove something that she would sell her roots to buy a place in someone else's life. She was remembering who she was, brushstroke, and who had always stood with her, even when she'd pulled away. As I drifted toward sleep in the quiet of the cabin, listening to the night wind rustle the pine branches outside, I thought of Mark. How proud he would have been of her, not just for walking away from a hollow promise, but for walking back towards something real. The wedding she'd excluded me from never happened. Instead, from the ashes of spectacle and illusion, something far more sacred had taken its place. A moment of reconnection, of redemption, of choosing truth over appearance, and family over fraud. We don't always recognize the turning points while we're in them, but that day had been one I'd remember for the rest of my life. Not because Amelia didn't get married, but because she remembered who she was. And most of all, she remembered that she was loved.